So I'm reading you a little bit from the beginning of this book and a little bit from the middle. And all that you have to know is that the second section concerns Jackson, who is a lifelong sleepwalker and generally violent sleeper. And with that, I'm going to begin, and thank you so much for coming. Our parents like to say that the first time Jackson and I met, we concentrated our focus so intently, grew so still, that they worried our little bodies might have forgotten we'd exited our watery beginnings, neglected the duty to breathe in and out. On the floor of the living room, we turned our still soft skin toward each other and blinked before demonstrating our talents in gripping and releasing. My 5 fingers around his chubby wrist, then his in embrace of mine. They say that the cat, our relative equal in size but a fascinating stranger in composition, strolled up to sniff the crowns of our heads, our full cheeks, but we offered him no attention. My mother and father and Julia, sitting on the couch, all happy with disbelief at the way their endlessly curious infants had quickly adopted such content with a tiny corner of the universe. The next part of the story, the one that would echo for decades afterward. Julia moved to scoop Jackson from the floor. I left my quiet behind and howled with such force that the cat, still skirting the carpet, panicked and ran. My mother came to me and attempted comfort. My father, at the door with Julia, shrugged and offered a comment about the volatile nature of young love. They laughed, of course, and agreed to bring us together again very soon. Jackson did not cry, but squirmed from Julia's restraint and tried to get a clearer vision of me. My wailing gained confidence and rhythm. I refused even the draw of my mother's breast, as if I knew that she would not be my family much longer, that I would find that elsewhere. That night, my parents broke their oath to leave me in the crib, no matter how upset, and brought me into their bed. They wondered at me where I lay between them, linked their fingers over the heaving abdomen they created together, sang me folk songs about low roads and high roads, told me the word for each part of my body, whispered secrets about the ocean and the brain and the patterns of the earth until I finally calmed enough to listen. Officially, I'm Ida, though Jackson has called me I as long as I can remember. The symbolism is sickening. Even in the worst of it, even in phases where I spoke almost exclusively in monosyllables and guttural sounds and sat around lost in the worn flannel shirt he left behind, I would never bring this up to anyone. And he calls me I like I as in myself. In a particularly memorable home video, shot by my father who poured his monomania into filmic evidence of our childhood for a full year before quitting pretty much entirely, Jackson and I are sitting in a sun-faded kiddie pool in my front yard, aged 3.5 or 4. There's something in my hands Jackson wants but can't have. The camera zooms and focuses. It's a set of brightly colored rubber rings. And he looks right at the camera, at my father, at Justice, and cries, "I want it, but I has it." Cut to Valentine's Day. We're at the kitchen table, our fingers covered in glue and the filth it's attracted, and my father has not taken pains to maintain any level of organization so that bow tie pasta and bits of stained doily and construction paper and crayons are everywhere. Somewhere in the background you can hear Jackson's mother, Julia, walking her younger son around the house. She is singing Baby Beluga full force, and he wholeheartedly, despite not knowing all the words. My father tries to point the camera toward the sound, but it can't be framed, and he switches back to us. What, he says, is Valentine's Day for? I ham for the camera and flirt and wiggle. Love, I say. And who do you love, honey, says my father, but before I can reply, Jackson butts in, his sticky fingers spread wide, grabs my face and plants that series of wet kisses only young children can, and I shriek and giggle. I love I, yells Jackson. I love I. Cut to a celebration ceremony at our kindergarten, the last substantial bit of video for a number of years. We have, of course, convinced the teachers to let us stand next to each other during the part of the performance where the class gets up to sing the alphabet. To his credit, my father covers all 4 rows of children, with the same historian penchant for accuracy and entirety I've inherited, before settling on the 2 of us. The many weak voices lilt and strain, and when it gets to F, you can see our faces widen and bodies tense. E, F, G, Jackson and I look at each other, H, and then we positively explode as we scream our initials, I, J, so much that neither of us has the energy for K. We've been holding our breath in our ambitious bodies for those 2 syllables the whole time, and we both sort of slump and stumble, and the shy boy in the tie next to us frowns at how we're embarrassing him. The majority of our lives, we were an exhausting display that others looked on, confused and ashamed to be watching. I, at least, was happy to bear witness, but even one letter changes a meaning entirely. No matter their proximity, different points of an alphabet refuse to be represented as the same. There's no guarantee that someone standing at precisely the same longitude and latitude as you will remember the view the same way. No promise that one person's memory of a moment or a month will parallel yours, retain the same value, shape the years of living that follow. Shortly after Jackson's 25th birthday, in his sleep, I began to hand him pieces of charcoal and large expanses of paper, glue, bits of tulle peculiar in color, string, broad stroke paint brushes. What followed were images so compelling that I couldn't help but put my palm to my mouth and tilt my head sideways and breathe a little quieter out of respect. Skeletons of lovers slumped toward each other in embraces beneath the earth, almost part of the roots, but not quite assimilated, their backs, you could tell, broken. Sad-looking monsters with jagged triangles of teeth, trying to hold the too delicate in their large claws. Pretty little boxes ruined, birds dead or dying. All of it in lines, make no mistake, deliberate. Though there was a softness, it did not come from any hesitant or small movements on the part of the artist. I had wished only for some other proof of the life that Jackson kept while he slept, evidence besides the destruction of our home, the bruises and scratches on my body, but it was an experiment he grew to resent me for. He did not wish to believe that all those lines and curves had come from him without his permission or trust. More so, he was uncomfortable with the fascination he felt in the mornings, tracing his fingers over the roots of ink or paint, turning the pieces over as if expecting an explanation on the back. At first, we experienced a certain joy in looking at them together, his eyes bulging, a slow grin spreading on his face that allowed permission for mine, often him drumming his fingers down my spine in affection and knowledge. But then he began pulling out the tools in the daytime, assuming that if he had created these glorious stretches of melancholy sea creatures and skeleton lovers and the like in his sleep, he could do so equally well at our kitchen table while the sun was still shining. It caused him great distress when he found that he couldn't even hold the instruments comfortably, no less summon whatever inspired him so while unconscious. Cheap reproductions ensued. The lines had no confidence. What had been stunning and jagged seemed only sloppy. That which was dark but hopeful and lovely in its desperation for redemption manifested in the daytime as only malevolent and one-dimensional. His face then, at the table he'd lovingly sanded, trying to speak a language he didn't know, was unbearable. I could only imagine what it was to literally compete with yourself. Being with someone for so long, forever practically, in our case, made witnessing an experience that private and unreachable by empathy an elaborate act of torture. After several weeks, he gave up. He bought a large old trunk that locked and placed the pieces we'd hung inside it. He slept like I had never seen him sleep. No words gurgling through from his dreams, very little movement, breathing steady and predictable. I was holding my breath the whole time.